Poll after poll after poll of the community has made it very clear that an overwhelming majority of Australians want this law to pass. An overwhelming majority of Australians recognise that people should have the right to die with dignity. Mr. President, I have witnessed that close hand. Close friends, one of them, one of them, Dr. John Kaye, a close friend and colleague who this chamber is familiar with. I witnessed his struggle with a terminal illness and the appalling and uncontrollable pain that he had towards the end of his life. He was given the best assistance with palliative care, but even the best assistance couldn't manage the pain. And he, like others who face the end of their life with increasing unmanageable pain, and for many they lose their dignity, and if the disease affects your mental capacity, it takes away your very soul and your very sense of identity. And to see that happening to yourself, to see that happening to your loved one, and not have a capacity to do something about it, to allow them to end their life before the dignity is taken away from them, it's a very hard thing, an impossibly hard thing. I only wish that this bill had been in place for my colleague Dr. John Kaye. I wish it had. I thought I'd end the contribution by just reading onto the record just one of many submissions that I've got, deeply heartfelt personal submissions from two daughters, Leah and Chella. But this is just one of dozens and dozens and dozens of heartfelt personal submissions and stories from people's families, their personal stories, from Kathy, from Karen, from Helen, from Kendall, from Joe, from Scott, from John, from Alex, from Nancy, from Kathy, and to name but a few. And I've read them. And if you're not compelled on reading those to support this law, I don't know what would support, what would get a majority of members over the line. And it will take a little bit of time, but I'd like to put onto the record what Leah and Chella say, and I'll end with their contribution. Leah and Chella are sisters and long-term residents of New South Wales, and their mum, Ingrid, was diagnosed with colon cancer in 2010, and she was in her early 60s. They were in their late teens and 20s. She wasn't ready to die, but she had no choice. She was diagnosed with a terminal illness. They weren't ready to lose their mum. It came as a huge shock to them. Chemo gave her a few more years, but her pain became extraordinary. And that's the introduction, and I'll read what they say. Mum had always been a supporter of voluntary euthanasia, and after the initial shock of her terminal diagnosis had worn off, she dedicated many hours to researching the possibility of dying at home before she lost mental wherewithal. She found support on illegal online forums where she found instructions on how to buy a lethal dose of muscle relaxant from Mexico and have it shipped to Australia under the guise of veterinary supplies. All she had to do was swallow the dose, lie down, and she would fall asleep within a matter of minutes. Although she was not sure she would use the drugs, she found that having them hidden away in a cupboard gave her a sense of choice in a situation she absolutely did not choose. Although she made the decision to tell us of her intentions and that she had bought these drugs, she unfortunately never felt comfortable telling us her specific plans. At first, she thought it would be possible for her family to be with her and to support her in her final moments, but she became more and more sick. She began to rethink our involvement. Although she wanted us to be there with her, she was distressed by the serious legal ramifications for us of being involved in voluntary euthanasia. Similarly, she was worried about telling friends of her plan. These concerns weighed heavily on her mind and forced her to plan a death that was solitary and secret. In March 2012, Mum had a belly the size of a pregnant woman at full term, could no longer use the toilet without assistance, and was in constant and awful pain. It was clear she was not going to get better. She took the drugs at home in the early hours of the morning, alone and in secret. She left a note for us saying she felt entirely at peace, because of the illegal status of voluntary euthanasia, we didn't get to say goodbye. Rather than her taking her own life, we see this more accurately as taking her own death, taking it back from the cancer that had taken everything else from her. This was her death. And the fact that she was able to die with some level of dignity before she lost her mental capacity was a rainbow in an otherwise dark storm. However, we strongly regret the fact that Mum had to spend so much energy on the logistics of managing her death. Unfortunately, with the current laws in place, she was unable to seek medical or psychological counsel to help her with this medically fraught and emotional decision. Further, she was forced to seek products that are not suited for human use. She was aware that there was a possibility that the drugs might not kill her and that she would instead end up in an even worse situation during her final weeks. At a time when the planning of even the simplest tasks required a mammoth effort, she was worrying about whether or not her choice to skip her final weeks of anguish would end up landing her children in jail. In her final months, she refused to go into care because she would not be able to take the drugs unless she was at home. If only she could have talked with her doctor about her wishes and come up with a medically safe, emotionally rewarding and legally sound plan for her death. Above all, we are devastated that the laws as they currently stand took Mum's last few good weeks from us. Mum was acutely aware of the fact that if she had wanted to euthanise herself, she would have to do so while she could still walk and think for herself. Because of the current laws, she was forced to die before she really had to. By preventing voluntary assisted death, our current laws rob already sick people of the life they have left. We can't help but think of the few extra weeks we might have had with her had she been guaranteed a legal, painless death with medical and psychological supervision. Mr. President, if the pleas from Leah and Chella don't persuade a majority of members in this House to vote for this law, I don't know what will.
Mr. President.